Everybody at the table knew the rules. When Kwon Seo-jin sat down for dinner, you didn't speak unless he spoke first. You didn't reach for the rice before he lifted his chopsticks. You didn't cough too loud, laugh too long, or look at him the wrong way. His mother knew the rules. His younger brother knew them. His 3 most trusted lieutenants, who had been invited tonight as a gesture of family, they knew the rules better than anyone. And Riley, his wife of 3 years, she knew them too. She just didn't care anymore. She sat at the far end of the long dining table in the private room of the Quan family estate, her dark skin catching the golden light from the low-hanging fixtures above. Her braids were pulled into a neat updo. Her outfit was simple, a cream-colored blouse, gold earrings her grandmother had given her back home in Kampala before she left for East Asia. She looked beautiful. Nobody noticed. Seo-jin hadn't looked at her once since they sat down 20 minutes ago. Not once. He was deep in conversation with his brother, Kwon Tae-sik, about something she couldn't hear from this far away. Every now and then, his mother, a sharp-faced woman named Madame Kwon, would lean in and add a comment, and both sons would nod like she had spoken gospel. Riley picked up her glass of water, set it down, picked it up again. She was invisible. It hadn't always been like this. When Seo-jin first brought her to this country, to this sprawling estate on the outskirts of Jeonju, he had treated her like she was the only person in every room. He opened doors. He learned how to say, "I missed you," in Luganda. He once had an entire greenhouse built on the east side of the property because she mentioned, just once, that she missed the flowers from home. That was before the territory wars with the Yoon faction. Before his father died and left him in charge of an empire that stretched across 6 provinces. Before the weight of being the head of the Kwon syndicate turned him into someone she barely recognized. Now she was just furniture. "More tea, Mrs. Kwon?" Riley blinked. One of the house staff, a young girl named Bora, stood beside her with a porcelain teapot. "No, thank you," Riley said quietly. Bora hesitated. Then she leaned down, just slightly, and whispered, "You should eat something, ma'am. You've barely touched your plate." Riley forced a small smile. "I'm fine." Bora didn't look convinced, but she bowed and stepped away. Riley turned her attention back to the table. Seo-jin was laughing now, actually laughing, at something Tae-sik had said. His lieutenants joined in. Even Madame Kwon cracked a thin smile. Nobody looked her way. She could have stood up and walked out, and she honestly believed, no, she knew, that it would take at least 10 minutes before anyone realized she was gone. But she didn't leave, because something else had her attention. It had started 15 minutes ago, when the main course was served. The kitchen staff brought out individual plates, each one personalized based on preference. Seo-jin always had the same thing at family dinners. Braised short ribs with a side of seasoned spinach and a small bowl of doenjang jjigae. It arrived on a black plate with a gold rim, his personal set. Riley had watched the plate being placed in front of him. She always watched. Not because she was suspicious by nature, but because 3 months ago she had overheard something she was never supposed to hear. She had been walking through the east corridor late one night, heading to the greenhouse because she couldn't sleep. The door to Seo-jin's private office was slightly open, and 2 voices were coming from inside. Not Seo-jin's voice. He was away in Mokpo that night. The voices belonged to Lieutenant Bayek and someone she didn't recognize. "It has to be at a family dinner," the unknown voice had said. "That's the only time he's relaxed. That's the only time his guard is down." "And the method?" Lieutenant Bayek had asked. "Slow acting, tasteless, mixed into the sauce of the short ribs. By the time he feels anything, it'll be too late." Riley had stood frozen in that hallway for what felt like an hour. In reality, it was probably 30 seconds. Then she had walked, silently, carefully, back to her room and sat on the edge of her bed until sunrise. She told no one, not because she didn't care, But because she had learned, in 3 years inside the Quan household, that trust was a currency, and she was bankrupt. If she told Seo Jin, he might not believe her. If she told Madame Kwon, the woman would twist it somehow and use it against her. If she told anyone else, it might get back to Beck before Seo Jin could act. So she waited, watched, paid attention to every meal, every gathering, every dinner. And tonight, she saw it. It was small, almost nothing. When the plates were being brought out, Lieutenant Bayek's hand had hovered, just for a second, over Seo Jin's plate. A quick pass, a tiny motion of his fingers. If you blinked, you'd miss it. Riley didn't blink. Her heart was doing something fast and painful inside her chest. She looked at Seo Jin's plate. The short ribs glistened under the light. The sauce looked normal. Everything looked normal. But it wasn't. She knew, with a certainty that sat like a stone in her stomach, that the food on that plate would end her husband's life. The same husband who hadn't looked at her in weeks, who forgot her birthday last month, who slept in his office more nights than their bedroom, who had, piece by piece, made her feel like she was nothing. But he was still her husband. And she was still Riley Nakamatte from Kampala, the girl who once chased a cobra out of her grandmother's kitchen with a broom at age 9, the girl who earned a full scholarship to study pharmacology in Daejeon, the girl who had looked the most dangerous man in the Jeolla province in the eye on their first meeting and said, "You don't scare me." She wasn't going to let him die at his own dinner table, but she also couldn't just say it out loud. Not here. Not with Beck sitting 4 seats away, watching everything with those calm, dead eyes of his. If she stood up and announced, "Don't eat that, it's poisoned," Beck would deny it. There would be chaos, and if Beck had allies in this room, which she suspected he did, then both she and Seo Jin could be in danger before anyone could react. No, she needed to do something that required no explanation, something instant. Something that couldn't be argued with. Riley stood up. Nobody looked. She picked up her plate, her untouched plate of japchae and grilled fish, and began walking down the length of the table. Her heels clicked against the floor. Still, nobody turned. They were all wrapped up in the conversation. Taisik was telling some story about a business deal in Gwangju. The lieutenants were laughing. Riley reached Seo Jin's seat. She set her plate down on the table beside his. Then, smoothly, naturally, as if it were the most normal thing in the world, she picked up his plate. Now he looked at her. "Riley?" His voice was low, confused, maybe a little annoyed. "What are you doing?" She didn't answer. She sat down, right there, in the empty chair beside him that was always left vacant. And she pulled his plate in front of her. She picked up his chopsticks, and she ate. She took a piece of the braised short rib, dipped it in the sauce, and put it in her mouth. Chewed, swallowed. The table went silent. Seo Jin stared at her. "Riley, what?" She took another bite, then another. Across the table, Lieutenant Bayek's face did something strange. For a man who never showed emotion, whose expression was always as flat as still water, something flickered. It was fast, but Riley caught it. Fear. He was afraid. Because the wrong person was eating the food. "Riley, stop." Seo Jin's hand closed over hers, the first time he had touched her in weeks. "What is wrong with you? Why are you eating my—" "Because I wanted to," she said calmly. Her voice didn't shake. Her hands didn't tremble. She looked directly into his eyes, those dark, unreadable eyes that had once looked at her like she was the beginning and end of everything. And she said, "Is that not allowed either?" Something shifted in his expression. The annoyance faded. Confusion deepened. And underneath it, just barely, a flash of something old, something from before. Madame Kwon's voice cut through like a blade. "This is inappropriate. Seo Jin, control your wife." Riley ignored her. She took one more bite. Then she set down the chopsticks and pushed the plate away. The food sat heavy in her stomach. Not from fullness, from knowing what she had just done to herself. She looked at Beck one more time. He was gripping the edge of the table so hard his knuckles had gone pale. His eyes were locked on her, not with anger, but with something worse. Panic. Riley stood. She smoothed the front of her blouse. She looked at her husband, who was now staring at her like she was someone he had never met before. And she said very quietly, "Excuse me, I'm not feeling well." She turned and walked out of the dining room. Her steps were steady. Her back was straight. She made it down the corridor, past the second hallway, past the painting of the mountain that Seo Jin's father had loved, past the heavy wooden door that led to the east wing, and then her knees buckled. She caught herself against the wall. Her vision swam. A cold sweat broke across her forehead, and her hands, which had been so steady at the table, were now shaking badly. She didn't know exactly what had been in that food. Her pharmacology training told her it could be any number of things: aconitine, thallium, something synthetic. Slow acting, the voice had said. Tasteless. By the time he feels anything, it'll be too late. She had maybe an hour, maybe less. Riley closed her eyes, took a breath. Then she pulled her phone from the small pocket of her skirt and dialed the only number she trusted. It rang 3 times. "Benny?" The voice on the other end was warm, familiar, and 6,000 miles away. "It's 2 in the morning here. Are you—" "Tunu," Riley said. Her older sister, the doctor. The only person in the world who knew everything. About Seo Jin, about the family, about what Riley had walked into when she married into the Quan syndicate. "I need you to listen to me very carefully." "What happened?" "I've been poisoned." Silence. "I ate something that was meant for someone else." "I don't know the compound, but it was described as slow-acting and tasteless, likely mixed into a sauce. I ingested it approximately 2 minutes ago. I need you to help me think." Another silence. Then Tunu's voice came back, sharp, clinical, every trace of sleepiness gone. "How much did you eat?" 3 bites, maybe 4. "Are you symptomatic?" "Dizziness, sweating, mild tremor in my hands." "That's fast for something described as slow-acting. Either the dose was high or your body weight compared to the intended target is significantly lower." "Benny, the person this was meant for, how much do they weigh?" "At least 30 kilograms more than me." "Then the relative dose you received is much higher. You need to get to a hospital now." "I can't." "What do you mean you can't?" "If I go to a hospital, the people who did this will know it failed. They'll try again, tonight, tomorrow, this week, and next time, I might not be there to stop it." "Riley Nakamatte, I swear." "Tunu, please, just help me think. What do I take? What do I do right now with what I have?" The line was quiet for 3 seconds. Then Tunu started talking, fast, precise, like she was running through a medical textbook in her head. "If it's plant-based, aconitine, family, you need activated charcoal immediately. Do you have access to a pharmacy?" "There's a medical supply room in the East Wing. Seo Jin keeps it stocked because of his line of work. Go, now, find activated charcoal. If they don't have it, find anything with a carbon-based adsorption agent. Take it immediately. Then drink as much water as you can. And Benny..." "Yes." "If your symptoms get worse, if you feel numbness in your face or tongue, if your heartbeat becomes irregular, you call an ambulance. I don't care about the politics of that house. Do you hear me?" "I hear you. Promise me. I promise." Riley hung up and pushed herself off the wall. The corridor stretched ahead of her, long, dimly lit, and spinning slightly at the edges of her vision. She started walking. Behind her, back in the dining room, chaos had already begun. Seo Jin was staring at the plate his wife had eaten from. His brain was working, slowly at first, then all at once. Why had she walked the entire length of the table? Why had she taken his plate specifically? Why had she looked at him like that? Like she was saying goodbye? And why? Had Beck looked the way he did? Seo Jin turned his head, slowly. Lieutenant Beck was no longer in his seat. The chair was empty. The napkin was on the table. The man was gone. Seo Jin felt something cold crawl up the back of his neck. He looked at Tae-sik. His brother's face told him that he had noticed it too. "Where?" Seo Jin said, his voice low, dangerous, a voice that had made grown men lose the feeling in their legs. "Is Beck?" Nobody answered. Seo Jin stood up. His chair scraped against the floor with a sound that silenced the entire room. He looked at his remaining two lieutenants, Lieutenant Moon and Lieutenant Go. "Find him." They moved immediately. Then Seo Jin turned toward the door his wife had walked through, and for the first time in a very long time, maybe for the first time since his father died, Kwon Seo Jin felt something he didn't know how to name. It was somewhere between terror and the realization that he had missed something important, something right in front of him. He started walking. Then he started running. Riley found the medical supply room at the end of the East Wing corridor. The door was locked. It was always locked. But she knew where the key was. Behind the third wall panel to the left, on a small hook. She'd discovered it by accident one evening when she was wandering the house during one of Seo Jin's long absences. Her fingers fumbled with the key. The dizziness was getting worse. The room tilted every time she blinked. She got the door open on the second try and stumbled inside. The room was small but well-stocked. Shelves lined every wall, gauze, antiseptic, syringes, IV bags, pill bottles with labels she could read because she'd spent 4 years studying their contents. Being married to a man in Seo Jin's world meant injuries were common. Knife wounds, blunt trauma, the occasional something worse. The Quan family kept this room supplied like a small clinic. Riley scanned the shelves. Her vision blurred, cleared, blurred again. There, second shelf, right side. A black container labeled in Korean, Hwal Song Tan, activated charcoal. She grabbed it, unscrewed the cap, mixed it with water from the sink in the corner. The liquid turned thick and dark, like ink. She drank it in 4 long gulps, fighting the urge to gag because the taste was exactly as terrible as she remembered from her training days. She drank more water after. Then she sat down on the cold floor, her back against the supply shelf, and closed her eyes. 1 hour, she told herself. If I can make it 1 hour, the charcoal should bind enough of whatever is in my system to keep me alive. Her phone buzzed. "Tunu. Did you find the charcoal?" "Yes. Took it." "Good. Stay awake. Do not fall asleep. Text me every 10 minutes. "Okay." Riley let her head rest against the shelf behind her. The ceiling above was plain white. A small crack ran across it diagonally, like a river on a map. She thought about Kampala, about the house where she grew up, the yellow one on the hill with the red tin roof and the mango tree in the yard. She thought about Tunu helping her study for exams at the kitchen table, about their grandmother stirring groundnut stew and humming old songs, about the day the scholarship letter arrived and her grandmother held it to her chest and cried and said, "You're going to be something, my girl." I'm sitting on the floor of a criminal's medical supply room after eating poison meant for my husband, Riley thought. Is this what you meant, Mama? She almost laughed. Almost. Then the door opened. Seo Jin stood in the doorway, breathing hard, his suit jacket gone, his sleeves shoved up to his elbows. His eyes swept the room and landed on her. On the floor, the open container of activated charcoal beside her. The black residue on her lips. He didn't move for a long moment. Then he dropped to his knees in front of her. "What did you do?" His voice was different now. Stripped of the coldness, stripped of the authority. It was raw, cracked. "Riley, what did you do?" "Saved your life, I think," she said. Her words came out a little slower than she wanted. The charcoal was doing its work, but the poison was fighting back. "Maybe. We'll see." "What are you talking about? What?" He saw the activated charcoal. His expression changed. the confusion sharpening into something harder as the pieces connected. He knew what activated charcoal was used for. Every person in his world did. The food, he said. Not a question. Your food, she corrected. The short ribs, someone put something in them. And you? His voice cracked again. He pressed his hand over his mouth, then dropped it. You ate it? Why would you? Riley, why didn't you just tell me? Because Beck was sitting right there. The name landed like a slap. Seo Jin went still. Beck? He's the one who arranged it. I overheard him 3 months ago in your office, talking to someone I didn't recognize. They planned to poison you at a family dinner. Slow acting in the sauce. She paused, swallowed. Her throat felt dry despite all the water. I watched him tonight. When the plates came out, his hand passed over yours. It was quick, but I saw it. Seo Jin stared at her. 100 things moved behind his eyes. Fury, disbelief, betrayal, guilt. His jaw worked like he was trying to speak, but couldn't find the shape of the words. 3 months, he finally said. You knew for 3 months. Yes, and you didn't tell me. Who was I supposed to tell, Seo Jin? You haven't spoken to me? Really spoken to me? In half a year. You don't look at me. You don't sit with me. You forgot my birthday. I'm a ghost in this house. I walk through rooms and nobody sees me. She paused, not for drama, but because a wave of dizziness rolled through her and she needed to breathe. So no, I didn't come to you with a story about one of your most trusted men plotting to end you because I had no reason to believe you'd listen. The silence that followed was the loudest thing she'd ever heard. Seo Jin looked away. At the wall, at the floor, at his own hands. Big, scarred, capable hands that had built and broken so many things. You're right, he said. Riley blinked. Of all the things she'd expected him to say, that wasn't one of them. You're right, he repeated. I wouldn't have listened. I would have told you that Beck has been with me since I was 17, that he was my father's man before he was mine, that you were mistaken, that you misheard. He looked back at her. I would have dismissed you, and you would have been alone with the truth. She didn't say anything. There was nothing to say. He was being honest, maybe for the first time in a long time, and she wasn't going to interrupt. Honesty with commentary. How do you feel? He asked. Right now. Tell me the truth. Dizzy. My hands won't stop shaking. My stomach. She trailed off. I took the charcoal within 5 minutes of ingestion. If the compound is what I think it is, the charcoal should absorb most of it before it reaches my bloodstream in a meaningful concentration. But I'm smaller than you. The dose was calibrated for your body mass. So you got hit harder. Yes. He pulled out his phone. What are you doing? She asked. Calling Dr. Ryu. Seo Jin, no. If the wrong people find out. Dr. Ryu has been with my family for 30 years. He is 71 years old. He has no ambition, no agenda, and no connection to Beck. He will come here, he will examine you, and he will not speak a word of this to anyone. That is not negotiable. There it was. The voice of Kwon Seo Jin, the head of the family, the man who gave orders that reshaped entire districts. But this time, it wasn't cold. It was fierce, protective. He made the call. It was short. 4 sentences, all in Korean, all delivered in a tone that left no room for questions. Then he hung up and looked at her again. He'll be here in 20 minutes. Can you stay awake that long? My sister told me not to fall asleep. You called your sister. She's a doctor. She's in Kampala. Doctors work everywhere, Seo Jin. A strange sound escaped him, something between a scoff and a laugh. Like his body remembered what humor felt like but wasn't quite sure how to do it anymore. He sat down on the floor beside her. Not across from her. Beside her. Close enough that their shoulders almost touched. I owe you an explanation, he said. You owe me several. Then I'll start with the most important one. He stared straight ahead at the opposite wall. After my father died, I was terrified. Every single day. The Yoon faction was circling. Half of my own people were questioning whether I could lead, and He stopped, started again. I am not my father. My father could hold this world in one hand and his family in the other and never let either one drop. I couldn't do that. So I chose the one I thought would collapse without me. The syndicate. Yes. And I was the one you dropped. He didn't answer. Which was an answer. I told myself it was temporary, he said after a while. That once things stabilized, I'd come back to you, I'd fix it, I'd be the man you married. But then weeks became months, and months became this. And at some point, I wasn't ignoring you because I was busy. I was ignoring you because I was ashamed, because every time I looked at you, I saw everything I was failing at. Riley's eyes stung. She blinked it away. She was not going to cry on the floor of a medical supply room with activated charcoal on her lips. She had more dignity than that. That greenhouse you built me, she said, in the East Garden. What about it? I go there every night, every single night. It's the only place in this entire estate that feels like it was made for me. And I sit there and I think, the man who built this knew me, knew what I loved, knew what I needed. Where did he go? Seo-jin closed his eyes. He's here, he said quietly. He's been here the whole time, just too stupid and scared to show it. They sat in silence for a moment. The hum of the house, distant voices, the sound of footsteps, the low vibration of the security systems, filled the space between them. Then Riley said, "Beck is gone." Seo-jin opened his eyes. "What?" "He left the table right after I walked out. He knows what happened. He knows the poison hit the wrong person, which means he's either running or he's planning his next move." Seo-jin's entire demeanor shifted. The vulnerability that had cracked open in the last few minutes sealed shut. Not completely, but enough. He was back. The strategist. The leader. "Moon and Go are looking for him," he said. "I sent them before I came. To find you. Do you trust them?" "Moon, yes. He's been loyal since before my father. Go." He hesitated. "Go, I'm less certain about." "Then you need to consider the possibility that Beck didn't act alone." Seo-jin looked at her. Really looked at her. The way he used to. Like she was the smartest person in any room she walked into. "You've been thinking about this for 3 months, he said. Not accusatory. Almost impressed. "I had a lot of free time," she said dryly. "Your wife has nothing to do in this house except tend flowers and think." Another almost laugh from him. Then he stood, offered her his hand. She took it. Her legs were unsteady, but his grip was firm. He didn't let go even after she was standing. "Can you walk?" he asked. "I've been walking through this house alone for a year. I think I can manage." "You're not alone anymore." She looked at him, searching for the lie, the performance, the political move of a man who had just learned his wife saved his life and was now calculating the debt. She didn't find any of that. What she found, instead, was a man who looked terrified. Not of Beck, not of the Yoon faction, not of the empire that was always one wrong decision away from crumbling. He was terrified of losing her. It was, she realized, probably the most honest he'd been since his father's funeral. "Okay," she said. "Then let's move. We can't stay in this room. If Beck has allies in the house, they'll be looking for both of us." "Where do we go?" "The greenhouse." He frowned. "The greenhouse? That's on the other side of... It has a separate ventilation system, only one entrance, and I installed a lock on the inside 6 months ago because it was the only room in this house where I felt safe. It also has a clear view of the east gate and the service road, which means we'll see anyone coming before they reach us." She paused. "I told you, I had a lot of free time." Seo-jin stared at her for a long moment. Then he shook his head slowly, not in disagreement, but in something that looked a lot like wonder. "I married the wrong woman," he said. Her stomach dropped. "Excuse me, I thought I married someone who needed my protection." Turns out I married someone who was already 10 steps ahead of me. They moved through the east wing quietly, staying close to the walls. Seo Jin kept his hand near the small of her back, not touching, but close. Ready. His other hand held his phone, which had buzzed 3 times since they left the supply room. He glanced at it each time but didn't answer. "Who's calling?" Riley asked. "Tae-sik. Answer it." "Not yet. Not until I know who in that room I can trust." "You can trust your brother." "How do you know?" "Because 3 weeks ago, Tae-sik found me in the greenhouse at 1 in the morning, and instead of asking why I was there or reporting it to your mother, he sat down on the bench across from me and said, 'You deserve better than how he's treating you.' Then he got up and left." She glanced at Seo Jin. "A man who says that to his brother's wife isn't conspiring to have that brother eliminated." Seo Jin processed this in silence. Then he answered the phone. "Tae-sik." She could hear the faint sound of his brother's voice, rapid, urgent. "Slow down," Seo Jin said. "Where? Both of them. No, don't engage. Keep everyone in the dining room and lock the doors. Nobody leaves, nobody enters." A pause. "Because I said so." He hung up. "What happened?" Riley asked. "Beck is gone, left through the south gate 20 minutes ago. The security footage shows him getting into a car that wasn't one of ours, and Go. Let me guess. Go is gone too." "Go is gone too." Riley nodded. She had suspected as much. In 3 months of watching and listening and being invisible, she had noticed things. Small things. Go always positioned himself near the exits. Go was the only lieutenant who never made eye contact with Seo Jin during meetings. Go received phone calls at odd hours and always stepped outside to take them. "They'll come back," she said. "Not tonight. They're not ready for a direct confrontation, but soon. Beck knows the layout of this estate better than almost anyone. He knows the security rotations, the blind spots in the camera system, the access codes. I'll change the codes tonight. Change the guards too. Anyone Beck personally recruited or trained, remove them from rotation until you can verify their loyalty." Seo Jin stopped walking. They were in the connecting corridor between the east wing and the garden passage. Moonlight came through the high windows, casting silver bars across the floor. "When did you learn all of this?" he asked. "The security rotations, the camera blind spots, I told you, 3 months, no one to talk to, nothing to do." She shrugged. "I walked this house every night. I learned its bones. You should have been terrified." "I was, every single night, but being terrified and being helpless are not the same thing, Seo Jin. You can be afraid and still move." They reached the greenhouse. Riley punched in the code on the lock she'd installed. A simple 4-digit deadbolt, nothing fancy, but enough to slow someone down, and they stepped inside. The warmth hit them immediately. The greenhouse was humid and fragrant, jasmine, orchids, a row of African violets that Riley had grown from cuttings she'd ordered from a nursery in Entebbe. The glass walls fogged slightly at the edges, and the moon hung heavy and white above them, visible through the transparent ceiling. Riley sat on the wooden bench near the center. Her dizziness had faded slightly. The charcoal was working, but fatigue was settling in behind her eyes like fog. Seo Jin stood near the door, looking out through the glass toward the east gate. The service road was dark and empty. "Dr. Ryu will be here soon," he said. "I'll direct him through the garden entrance." "Okay." Silence. Then Seo Jin said, without turning around, "I didn't forget your birthday." Riley looked up. "What?" "Last month, September 14th. "I didn't forget." He still faced the glass. "I had Bora order a cake. I had Tae-sik pick up the earrings you'd been looking at in the catalog, the jade ones, from the artisan in Jeonju. Everything was ready. And then I stood outside our bedroom door for 15 minutes and couldn't bring myself to knock, because I hadn't spoken to you properly in so long that I didn't know how to start. And I thought, if I walk in there with a cake and a gift after months of nothing, it would be an insult, like I could fix it with objects." Riley was quiet for a moment. "You're right," she said. "It would have been an insult." He winced. But, she continued, it also would have been a start. He turned around. The moonlight caught his face, the sharp jaw, the tired eyes, the lines around his mouth that hadn't been there 3 years ago. He looked, for the first time since she'd known him, like a man who was not in control of a single thing in his life. Is it too late? He asked. To start? Riley looked at him. At the greenhouse he'd built for her. At the flowers she'd grown to survive the loneliness. At the moonlight that didn't care about syndicates or factions or power. That just fell, evenly, on everything. Ask me again after I survive the night, she said. He almost smiled. Her phone buzzed. Tunu. 10 minutes. Are you awake? Awake. Found charcoal. Husband found me. The mafia husband? The only one I have. Is he being useful? Riley looked at Seo Jin, who was now pacing by the door, phone in hand, coordinating with Tae-sik in low, rapid Korean. He's trying. Good. Tell him if you don't survive, I'm coming there personally and I will be his biggest problem. Despite everything, the poison in her system, the traitors in the house, the uncertainty of what came next. Riley smiled. Dr. Ryu arrived 17 minutes later. He was, exactly as Seo Jin had described, 71, slight, with wire-rimmed glasses and the calm, unhurried movement of a man who had seen everything at least twice. He came through the garden entrance carrying a leather medical bag that looked older than Riley. He didn't ask questions about why they were in a greenhouse. He didn't ask why Riley had activated charcoal residue on her fingers. He sat on the bench beside her, checked her pulse, looked at her eyes with a small pen light, listened to her heart with a stethoscope that he warmed between his palms first, and then asked her to describe exactly what she'd eaten and how much. She told him everything, the short ribs, the sauce, 3 or 4 bites, the timeline. Dr. Ryu nodded slowly. He opened his bag and pulled out a small kit. Vials, a syringe, rubber tubing. I'm going to take a blood sample, he said in accented but clear English. I can have it analyzed within 2 hours at my private lab. In the meantime, he paused, studied her face. You were a pharmacology student, Mrs. Kwon. I completed my degree. Then you already know what I'm going to say. Activated charcoal within the first 5 minutes is the best first response for oral ingestion of most toxins. Keep hydrated. Monitor for cardiac irregularities. If symptoms worsen, numbness, arrhythmia, difficulty breathing, go to the nearest emergency facility. Dr. Ryu's eyebrows lifted slightly. Correct. He drew the blood sample, labeled it, and packed it carefully. Then he reached into his bag and produced a small device, a portable heart monitor. Wear this, he said, clipping it to her wrist. It transmits to my phone. If anything changes, I'll know immediately. Thank you, doctor. He stood, then hesitated. He looked at Seo Jin, who had been standing silent near the door the entire time, watching everything with an intensity that could have melted glass. Mr. Kwon, Dr. Ryu said carefully, your wife is strong and she acted quickly. The charcoal was the right call, but I want to be clear. Depending on the substance, the next 6 to 12 hours are critical. She should not be alone. She won't be, Seo Jin said. His voice left no room for discussion. Dr. Ryu gave a small nod, picked up his bag, and left the way he came. The greenhouse settled back into quiet. Just the hum of the ventilation system and the distant sound of wind against the glass walls. Seo Jin pulled a chair from the corner, the one Riley used when she was repotting plants, and sat across from her. Tell me everything, he said, from the beginning. 3 months ago, every detail. So she did. She told him about the night in the corridor, the voices behind the office door, the words, slow-acting, tasteless, mixed into the sauce. She told him about the weeks after, when she tried to figure out who the second voice belonged to. She'd narrowed it down to 3 possibilities. Go, a man named Shin who ran the Quan logistics operation in Mokpo, or someone from outside the syndicate entirely. possibly connected to the Yoon faction. Why those three? Seo Jin asked. Go, because he'd been acting strange for months. Arriving late, leaving early, never fully present. Shin, because he's the only person in your organization who has contacts with the Yoon family's chemical supply chain, and an outsider, because Beck is smart enough to use a cutout. A cutout? Someone with no traceable connection to your inner circle. A hired specialist. Someone who provides the method and the materials, then disappears. Seo Jin's expression was a shifting landscape. Anger, then focus, then something that looked almost like pride. It was unsettling to see all three at once. You said you watched every meal after that night, he said. Every family dinner, every gathering where food was served in the main house. I watched the kitchen. I watched the serving staff. I watched Baek. And tonight, you were certain? I was certain the moment I saw his hand pass over your plate. The motion was deliberate. He palmed something, a capsule, a vial, something small, and released it into the sauce. It took less than a second. Seo Jin leaned forward, elbows on his knees. Why not swap the plate? Why not knock it off the table? Why eat it yourself? Because swapping or knocking it over would have raised questions. Beck would have denied everything. You would have had no proof, and he would have known that I knew, which would have made me his next target. But if I ate it... She trailed off, choosing her words. If I ate it, two things happened. 1, you were safe. 2, Beck panicked. He showed his hand, and when a man like Beck panics, he makes mistakes. Like running. He's out there now, exposed. He left the estate without authorization. That alone is a violation of your internal protocols. Combined with what I witnessed, you now have cause to investigate him, and anyone connected to him, without tipping off the rest of your organization. Seo Jin sat back. He ran his hand over his face. For a long moment, he just looked at her. Not with the detached gaze of the past year. Not with the cold authority of a syndicate boss, but with the open, almost overwhelmed expression of a man who was realizing, very slowly, that the person sitting across from him had just played a better game of strategy than anyone in his organization ever had. You're terrifying, he said. I'm a pharmacologist who married into a crime family. Adaptation was necessary. Riley, and before you say anything about how I should have come to you, I need you to understand something. She held his gaze, steady, unblinking. For the past year, I have lived in this house like a stranger. Your mother treats me like a stain on the family name. Your staff whisper when I pass. Your lieutenants look through me like I'm not there. And you, the one person who was supposed to see me, chose not to. He didn't flinch. He took it. Every word. I survived that, she continued. I survived the loneliness and the silence and the feeling that I had made the biggest mistake of my life coming here. And when I found out that someone was trying to end you, I didn't collapse. I didn't panic. I watched. I waited. I gathered information. I prepared. Because that is what I was raised to do. By a grandmother who taught me that fear is not an excuse, and a sister who showed me that knowledge is the best weapon anyone can carry. She took a breath. So when you ask why I didn't come to you, the answer is that I had already learned how to survive in this house without you. And that should frighten you more than Beck ever could. The greenhouse was very quiet. Seo Jin's eyes were red. Not from crying. She didn't think she'd ever seen him cry, but from the strain of holding something back. It does, he said. It frightens me. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small box, dark blue velvet. He placed it on the bench between them. Riley looked at it. What is that? Open it. She did. Inside, resting on white silk, were 2 jade earrings, delicate, hand-carved with gold clasps. The ones from the catalog. The ones he'd gotten for her birthday. I've been carrying them for a month, he said, every day, in my pocket. Like if I kept them close, it would count as something. He shook his head. It doesn't count. I know that. But I want you to have them. Not as an apology, not as a fix, just as proof that even when I was at my worst, even when I couldn't look at you, I was still thinking about you. Every single day. Riley looked at the earrings. They were beautiful. The jade caught the moonlight and glowed faintly green, the color of new leaves. She didn't put them on. Not yet. But she closed the box gently and placed it in her pocket. "Proof is a start," she said. "But it's not enough." "I know. I need more than earrings, Seo-jin. I need to be your partner. Not your decoration, not your secret. Not the woman who sits at the far end of the table where nobody can hear her. I need a seat at the table. The real table. The one where decisions are made. You want in on the business? I want in on your life. All of it. If I'm going to risk my life for you, and apparently I already have, then I need to know what I'm protecting. And you need to trust me enough to show me." He held her gaze for a long time. Then he extended his hand. "Partners," he said. She looked at his hand. Looked at him. "If you break this," she said, "I'm going back to Kampala, and I'm taking the greenhouse." The faintest crack of a smile. "Fair." She shook his hand. At 11:47 p.m., Seo-jin's phone rang. "Tae-sik." "Go ahead," Seo-jin said, putting it on speaker. "Hyung, we've got a problem." "Define the problem." Beck didn't just run. He went to the Yoon compound. Silence. The kind of silence that has weight. "How do you know?" Seo-jin asked. Mun tracked the car from the South Gate footage. It crossed into Yoon territory 40 minutes ago, and, "Hyung, there's more." "Tell me." "One of the kitchen staff, a girl named Soo-yeon, she didn't come to work today. She was supposed to be on the dinner shift. Her replacement was a woman none of the regular staff recognized. I pulled the employment records. The replacement, a woman named Jang Mi-rae, doesn't exist. No ID number, no address, no history." Riley sat up straighter. "She prepared the plates?" Tae-sik paused. "Is that sister-in-law?" "Yes," Seo-jin said. "Answer her." Yes." According to the kitchen manager, the replacement was assigned to plating the main course. She handled Mr. Kwon's plate directly. Riley and Seo-jin exchanged a look. The picture was becoming clearer and uglier. "Tae-sik," Riley said, leaning toward the phone. "The regular staff member, Soo-yeon, do you have her personal phone? Number? I can get it." "Get it. Call her, not from your phone. Use a line she won't recognize. If she answers, she may have simply been paid to stay home today. If she doesn't answer," she didn't finish the sentence. "She didn't need to." "Understood," Tae-sik said. "I'll call you back." He hung up. Seo-jin looked at Riley. "You think they got to Soo-yeon?" "I think there are two possibilities. Either she was bribed to take the day off, in which case she's fine and just scared, or she was removed because she would have noticed the switch, in which case we have a bigger problem." "Yes." Seo-jin paced the length of the greenhouse. 4 steps one way, 4 steps back. He did this when he was thinking. Riley had observed it 100 times through windows and doorways during the past year of watching him from a distance. "The Yoon faction," he said. "If Beck has defected to them, he's carrying everything. Our supply routes, our financial structure, our security protocols. He was at the highest level. He knows everything," Riley confirmed. "Which is why you can't wait for him to make the next move. You have to act first." "Act how? I can't start a war over—" "Not a war, a renegotiation." He stopped pacing. "A renegotiation?" "You said the Yoon faction has been circling since your father passed. They want territory. Specifically the ports in Gunsan and the distribution network through the Chungcheong corridor. What if you gave them part of it?" "Give them—" He stared at her. "You want me to surrender territory. I want you to trade it. The Gunsan ports are profitable but vulnerable. You've been losing shipments there for 6 months because the local officials flipped to the Yoon side. Holding them is costing you more than they earn. But the Yoons don't know that. They see a prize. Let them have it, in exchange for Bayek. You want me to buy my traitor back? I want you to let the Yoons think they won. Get a port they think is valuable. You get Beck. And more importantly, you get to debrief him before anyone else does. Everything he knows, everything he's told them, every contact he's compromised. You extract the information, then you deal with him through your own channels. Seo Jin's expression shifted through several phases. Resistance, then calculation, then a grudging recognition that the math worked. That's not a bad plan. It's a good plan. It means trusting that the Yoons will honor a deal. The Yoons are greedy, not stupid. If you offer them something they want, they'll take it. Especially if the alternative is a full-scale conflict that neither side can afford right now. He shook his head slowly. My father's advisors have been with me for 2 years, and none of them have ever thought like this. Your father's advisors are thinking like soldiers. I'm thinking like a scientist. You don't fight the problem. You change the variables until the equation works in your favor. At 12:22 a.m., Dr. Ryu called. I have preliminary results, he said. The compound is a modified derivative, plant-based, likely a conatine family, as you suspected, Mrs. Kwon. The dose was significant, but not immediately lethal for someone of your husband's size. For someone of your size, however, it could have been, Riley said. Yes, the activated charcoal likely prevented the worst of it, but I'd like to administer an additional treatment, an IV infusion to support your liver and kidneys over the next few hours. I can set it up there, in whatever location you're in. The greenhouse. The greenhouse. Very well. 20 minutes later, Riley was sitting with an IV line in her arm, a bag of clear fluid hanging from a plant hook that normally held a fern. Dr. Ryu had rigged it with the practical efficiency of a man who had clearly set up medical equipment in stranger places. Your vitals are stable, he said, reviewing the data from the wrist monitor. Heart rhythm is normal. No signs of arrhythmia or respiratory distress. I'll monitor remotely through the night. Thank you, doctor. He paused at the door, looked back at her, then at Seo Jin, then back at her. In my 30 years with this family, he said quietly, I have seen many acts of loyalty. What you did tonight, Mrs. Kwon, surpasses all of them. He left. Riley looked at the IV in her arm, at the medical monitor on her wrist, at the jade earring box in her pocket and the orchid swaying gently on the shelf beside her. Seo Jin. Yes? When this is over, when Beck is handled and the house is secure and things are as close to normal as they get in your world, I want to go back to Kampala. His face went blank, a wall slamming up. You want to leave? I want to visit. My grandmother is 86. My sister hasn't seen me in person in 2 years, and She stopped. Started again. I need to remember who I was before I became the invisible wife of Kwon Seo Jin. The wall behind his eyes cracked. Not down, just enough to see through. How long? He asked. 2 weeks. And you'll come back? She could have said yes immediately. Could have reassured him, smoothed it over, made it easy. But easy wasn't what they needed right now. They needed truth, even when it was uncomfortable. That depends, she said, on what I come back to. He nodded slowly, not happy, but accepting. Because for the first time in their marriage, he understood that her staying wasn't something he could command. It was something he had to earn. Okay, he said. 2 weeks. And you're coming to the airport. What? When I leave, you're coming to the airport, and when I come back, you'll be there again, at the gate, not because you have to, because you want to. It was such a small thing, such a human, ordinary, simple thing, a husband at an airport, waiting. But in Seo Jin's world, where everything was delegation and distance and protocol, it was enormous. I'll be there, he said. The next 72 hours reshaped the Quan family like a storm reshaping a coastline. Seo Jin moved fast, faster than Riley had ever seen him move, and she'd seen him make decisions that altered the power balance of entire provinces in the time it took to finish a cup of tea. By dawn on the first day, every access code in the estate had been changed. The security team was reorganized. 6 guards who had been personally recruited by Beck were reassigned to non-sensitive posts in the outer perimeter. Taisik oversaw the sweep personally, checking every camera, every sensor, every lock. By midday, the regular kitchen staff member, Soo Yeon, was found. She was alive, frightened but unharmed. She'd been paid 2 months' salary by an unknown woman to take the day off and not ask questions. The payment had come in cash, left in an envelope taped to the inside of her locker at work. No note, no name. The woman who'd replaced her, the ghost, employee, Jang Mi-rae, had vanished. No trace, like she'd never existed. Professional, Riley said when Taisik reported this. They were in Seo Jin's private office now, the same room where Riley had overheard the plot 3 months ago. She sat in a chair by the window, IV long removed, color returning to her face. Dr. Ryu's overnight monitoring had shown no complications. The charcoal had done its job. She was a specialist, Riley continued. Brought in specifically for the dinner, she prepared the plate, delivered the poison, and disappeared. Beck used her as a tool, not a partner. So we can't track her back to Beck? Taisik asked. Not easily, but we don't need to. Beck's location is confirmed. He's with the Yoons. That's our leverage point. Seo Jin was on the phone at his desk, speaking in low, rapid Korean. He'd been on calls for hours, rebuilding his network, assessing loyalty, mapping who knew what. Every few minutes he'd glance across the room at Riley, not with the cold indifference of before, but with something watchful, attentive, like he was learning her for the first time, or maybe relearning her. Madame Quan appeared in the doorway at 2 p.m. She was a tall woman, taller than both her sons, with silver-streaked hair that she wore in a severe bun and a face that could have been carved from stone. She had never warmed to Riley, not when they first met, not at the wedding, not in 3 years of living under the same roof. I need to speak with my son, she said. Her eyes slid past Riley like she was part of the furniture. Then speak, Seo Jin said without looking up from his phone call. He held up one finger. Wait, finish the call, and set the phone down. What is it? Madame Quan entered the room. She did not sit. I've heard what happened, she said. About Beck, about the incident at dinner. It wasn't an incident, Mother. It was an attempted assassination. Yes, and I've also heard that she, a slight incline of her head toward Riley, was the one who consumed the tainted food. She saved my life. She acted recklessly. If she had simply reported what she knew, she tried, Seo Jin said. His voice was dangerously even. For 3 months, she carried this knowledge alone. She didn't come to me because I'd given her no reason to believe I'd listen. She didn't come to you because... He paused, choosing his next words carefully. Because the environment in this house did not make her feel safe enough to trust anyone. Madame Quan's expression flickered. Just barely. Are you blaming me? I'm stating a fact. My wife has lived in this house for 3 years, and she has been treated as an outsider every single day. By the staff, by the family, by me. He stood. That ends now. Seo Jin. She will be present at all family meetings going forward. She will have access to the same information I have. She will be treated as my partner, not my accessory. Is that clear? Madam, Kwon's jaw worked silently. Her eyes, sharp, intelligent, calculating, moved from her son to Riley and back again. Riley could practically see the political math happening behind those eyes. The older woman was weighing costs and benefits, alliances and appearances, power and perception. Finally, Madame Quan turned to Riley. You knew about the threat for 3 months, she said, and you told no one. I told no one because there was no one to tell. You could have come to me. With respect, Madame Quan, the last time I brought a concern to you about the household budget, you told me that family finances were not my business, and that I should focus on being a wife. Riley kept her voice calm, measured. I couldn't risk the same response when the stakes were your son's life. The silence that followed was deep enough to drown in. Madame Kwon's face went through something complicated. Not quite shame, not quite acknowledgement, but somewhere in the neighborhood of both. She was a proud woman. Admitting fault was not something she did. Not publicly, not to anyone. But she wasn't stupid either. "I see," she said finally. Then, after another long pause, "The jade earrings. You have them?" Riley blinked. "Yes, how did you—" "I helped him choose them. He couldn't decide between the jade and the pearl. I told him jade, it suits your skin better." And then Madame Quan did something that Riley had never, in 3 full years, seen her do. She gave Riley a small nod. Not warm, not friendly, but respectful. The kind of nod you give someone you've underestimated and are now forced to reconsider. Then she turned and left the room. Tae-sik, who had been standing near the bookshelf trying very hard to be invisible, let out a long breath. That's the closest thing to an apology she's ever given anyone, including father. Seo-jin looked at Riley. "Are you all right?" "I'm fine. I've survived worse conversations." "You've survived worse everything." On the second day, Seo-jin made contact with the Yoon faction. He didn't go through official channels. Those were too slow and too public. Instead, he used a back channel that his father had established decades ago. A neutral party named No Byung-cheol, a retired judge who lived in the countryside near Namwon and who had served as an intermediary between the families for 30 years. No was 83, sharp as a blade, and trusted by both sides for one simple reason. He had no interest in power. He just wanted to be left alone to tend his persimmon trees. The message was simple. Kwon Seo-jin proposed a meeting. Neutral ground, within 48 hours. He was prepared to discuss territorial adjustments in exchange for the return of a former associate. The Yoons responded within 4 hours. They agreed. "That was fast," Tae-sik said. "Too fast," Riley said. They were in the greenhouse again. It had become their unofficial war room, which would have been funny if the stakes weren't so high. Riley was at the bench with a notebook open in front of her, where she'd been mapping the Quan syndicate's territorial holdings, financial flows, and personnel structure. She'd asked for access to the records the day before, and Seo-jin, to the visible shock of everyone in the household, had given it to her. "Why too fast?" Seo-jin asked. "Because the Yoons have been wanting this territory for years. If they agree to meet within 4 hours of your proposal, it means they already have a plan. They're not reacting, they're executing. You think they anticipated the trade? I think Beck didn't just run to them. I think he was already theirs. Months ago, maybe longer. This wasn't a defection, it was a retrieval. The Yoons planted him, or turned him, and when the assassination failed, they pulled him out." Seo-jin sat with this. His face didn't change, but his hands, resting on his knees, curled slightly. "If that's true," Tae-sik said slowly, "then the meeting is a trap." "Not necessarily a trap," Riley said. "The Yoons are pragmatic. They won't try to eliminate Seo-jin at a meeting brokered by No. That would end the neutrality agreement and make them enemies of every other faction in the region. But they will try to extract maximum advantage. They'll push for more than the Gunsan ports. What else would they want? Control of the Chungcheong corridor, like I mentioned before, but also recognition. The Yoon family has been treated as second tier for decades. Your father kept them at arm's length. What they want, more than territory, is status. A seat at the table. Seo-jin's eyebrow rose. "You want me to elevate the Yoons? I want you to let them think they've been elevated. There's a difference. You give them the Gunsan ports, which, as we discussed, are a liability for you right now. You give them a formal acknowledgement of territorial sovereignty in areas they already control anyway. And in return, you get back. You get a peace agreement that stabilizes both organizations, and you buy time to rebuild from the inside." Buy time for what? To clean house. Beck may have been the most visible traitor, but he wasn't the only one. Go is still missing. The woman in the kitchen was hired by someone. There are others, People inside your organization who were feeding information to the Yoons. You need time to identify them. A peace agreement gives you that time. Tae-sik whistled low. Hyung, where did you find this woman? At a pharmacology conference in Daejeon, Seo-jin said. She was presenting a paper on toxin adsorption rates in activated carbon compounds. And you thought, yes, perfect wife material? I thought she was the most brilliant person in the room. I was right. Riley looked up from her notebook. Their eyes met. Something passed between them. Not the grand dramatic thing you see in movies, but something quieter. A recognition, a recalibration. Two people who had been out of alignment for a long time, slowly finding their way back to the same frequency. The meeting, she said. When is it? Tomorrow evening, at No's estate in Namwon. I'm coming. Both Seo-jin and Tae-sik started talking at the same time. That's not, absolutely not. Riley held up one hand. They stopped. I'm coming, she repeated, for two reasons. One, I have a better understanding of the Yoon's likely negotiation strategy than anyone in this room, because I've spent 3 months studying the entire landscape of your operations, while everyone else was too busy being important to notice. Two, my presence at the table sends a message. What message? Seo-jin asked. That the Kwon family is united, that the assassination attempt failed, and that your household is stronger, not weaker, that you have people around you who are willing to risk their lives, and that you trust them enough to bring them to the most important meeting of the year. She paused. Also, Madam Kwon just agreed to treat me as your partner. If I stay home while you negotiate the future of this family, that agreement means nothing. Seo-jin looked at her for a long time. You'll sit at the table, he said. Not behind me, not beside me, at the table. That's all I've ever asked. The meeting took place on the third evening. No Byung-cheol's estate was a traditional Korean compound. Low buildings arranged around a central courtyard, surrounded by persimmon trees that the old judge tended himself. The courtyard was lit with paper lanterns, and the meeting room was a large hanok with sliding doors open to let in the autumn air. Seo-jin arrived with Riley, Tae-sik, and Lieutenant Moon. 4 people, lean, deliberate. The Yoons arrived with 6. Their patriarch, Yoon Jae-seong, his daughter, Yoon Seo-ah, who managed their financial operations, 3 advisors, and, seated at the far end of their delegation with the rigid posture of a man who knew he was being bargained over like property, Beck. He looked different, smaller somehow. The calm authority that had always surrounded him like armor was gone. His eyes darted around the room, landing briefly on Seo-jin, then on Riley, and staying there. She saw something in his expression that she hadn't expected. Not anger, not defiance. Regret. She filed it away and turned her attention to Yoon Jae-seong. He was in his early 60s, a compact man with a round face and a smile that never quite reached his eyes. He greeted Seo-jin with the careful politeness of a man who was already counting his winnings. Kwon Seo-jin, he said. It's been too long. Not long enough, Seo-jin replied. But his tone was civil. This was diplomacy, not war. The rules were different. They sat. Tea was served. No Byung-cheol presided from the head of the table, silent, watchful, his presence alone a guarantee that both sides would behave. The negotiation began. It lasted 3 hours. Riley didn't speak for the first 90 minutes. She listened. She watched Yoon Jae-seong's body language, the way he leaned forward when he sensed advantage, the way his daughter would touch her father's arm when she thought he was pushing too hard. She watched the advisors. 2 were attentive. 1 kept checking his phone under the table. She watched Beck. He never spoke, never looked up, sat like a man waiting for a verdict. At the 90-minute mark, Yoon Jae-seong made his push. The Gunsan ports are a generous offer, he said smoothly. But given the circumstances, given that a member of your own inner circle saw fit to seek our protection, I think it's fair to say that the Quan organization is in a transitional period. Perhaps a more comprehensive arrangement is warranted. Define comprehensive, Seo-jin said. Gunsan, the Chungcheong Corridor, and a joint oversight committee for the Jeolla operations. Tae-sik stiffened. Joint oversight was code for shared control. And shared control of the Jeolla operations, the heart of the Quan Empire, was essentially a takeover. Seo-jin's expression didn't change. That's a significant request. These are significant times. This was the moment. Riley could feel it, the hinge point where the conversation would tip one way or the other. She spoke. Mr. Yoon. Everyone turned. Yoon Jae-seong's eyebrows rose slightly. Whether from surprise that she'd spoken or curiosity about what she'd say, she couldn't tell. You have a strong position tonight, she continued. Your faction has gained a valuable intelligence asset. She glanced at Beck. And you've been offered territory that you've wanted for years. But I'd like to point out something that may not have been part of your calculation. And what is that? Lieutenant Baek came to you because his attempt to eliminate my husband failed. He's not with you because he believes in the Yoon vision. He's with you because he had nowhere else to go. That makes him a liability, not an asset. Yoon Seo-ah, the daughter, leaned forward. She was sharp-featured, intelligent, probably mid-30s. How so? A man who betrays his own family doesn't become loyal to his new one. He becomes a calculation, always measuring which side offers him the best chance of survival. Today, that's you. Tomorrow? Riley shrugged. Who knows? You're not gaining a soldier, you're gaining a variable. Yoon Jae-seong's smile faded slightly. That's an interesting perspective from, forgive me, but what exactly is your role here? I'm the woman who ate the poison meant for my husband, which I think qualifies me to have an opinion on the man who put it there. The room went very still. Yoon Jae-seong looked at her, really looked for the first time. Then he looked at Seo-jin, then back at her. The Gunsan ports, he said slowly, and formal recognition of Yoon's sovereignty in our current territories. No joint committee. And Beck, Riley said. And Baek, Seo-jin nodded. Agreed. No Byung-cheol, who had been silent the entire time, picked up his tea and took a small sip. Then we have an arrangement. They drove back to Jeonju in the dark. Tae-sik drove. Mun sat in the passenger seat. Seo-jin and Riley sat in the back. Between them, handcuffed, silent, staring at the floor, sat Beck. Nobody spoke for the first 20 minutes of the drive. Then Beck said quietly, almost to himself, I didn't know it would be you. Riley turned her head. What? The food. I didn't... His voice cracked. I thought he would eat it. Just him. I never thought you would... You never thought about me at all, Riley said. Not with anger. Just fact. Nobody in that house did. Beck closed his eyes. I'm sorry. Sorry that you tried to end my husband, or sorry that you failed? He didn't answer. Riley faced forward again. The headlights cut through the dark countryside, and the mountains rose on either side like sleeping giants. Why? Seo-jin's voice was low. Controlled. But underneath it, pain. The kind of pain that comes from discovering that someone you trusted completely had been working to destroy you. Why, Beck? You've been with me since you were 17. Yes, and in all those years, not once did you ask me what I wanted, what I needed. You assumed my loyalty. You took it for granted. Just like... He stopped. Just like what? Beck looked at Riley, then back at the floor. Just like you took her for granted. The car was silent. Seo-jin didn't speak for the rest of the drive. 2 weeks later, Riley stood in the main terminal of Cheongju International Airport with a single suitcase and a carry-on bag that held 3 books, her laptop, and a small container of dried hibiscus tea that her grandmother loved. Seo-jin was there. He stood near the departure gate in a dark coat, hands in his pockets, looking profoundly out of place among the families and business travelers and university students shuffling through the terminal with their earbuds in. He was the kind of man who radiated authority even when he was doing nothing. People gave him a wide berth without knowing why. Riley walked up to him. "You came," she said. "I said I would." "You've said a lot of things." "I know. I'm working on the follow-through." She studied his face. 2 weeks had changed him, not dramatically, not in any way a stranger would notice. But she noticed. The tension around his eyes had softened slightly. He'd been sleeping more. She knew because she'd heard him come to bed before midnight 3 times in the past week, something that hadn't happened in over a year. And twice, she'd found fresh flowers in the greenhouse. Not from the garden staff, because she'd asked. He'd placed them himself, quietly, without announcement. Small things, but small things were how you rebuilt something that had been taken apart. "The security review?" she asked. "Completed. 12. Personnel removed. 3 were confirmed Yoon contacts. The rest were precautionary." "And Beck?" Seo Jin's jaw shifted. "He's being held in the secure facility in Imsil. He's cooperating." "Cooperating how?" "He gave us everything. Names, dates, methods, contacts. The entire network that the Yoons had built inside our organization. He mapped it. Completely." "Why?" I asked him the same thing. He said... Seo Jin paused. "He said he owed it to you." Riley blinked. "To me?" "He said that when you ate that food, when you chose to take something meant for someone else, someone who hadn't treated you well, without hesitation, it was the first genuinely selfless thing he'd seen anyone in our world do, and it made him realize how far he'd fallen." Riley didn't know what to do with that. She wasn't ready to forgive Beck. She might never be. But she could acknowledge that people were complicated, that the same person could betray you and be moved by you and feel genuine remorse, all at the same time. "I'm gone for 2 weeks," she said. "Not forever. I know. When I come back, I want things to be different, not just between us. In the house, I want your mother to call me by my first name. I want the staff to stop whispering when I walk past. I want a seat at every meeting where the family's future is discussed. Done. And I want to finish my research." This was new. Seo Jin frowned. "Your research?" "My pharmacology thesis. I left it unfinished when I moved here. I was 6 months from completion. I want to go back to the university in Daejeon and complete it." "You want to go back to school?" "I want to finish what I started. I gave up my career to come here, Seo Jin. I don't regret it. But I'm not done with it either." He processed this. She could see him working through the logistics, the security implications, the scheduling, the public perception of a Quan family member enrolled at a university. "Okay," he said. "Okay? I'll arrange. Security for the campus. Taisik can coordinate." "I don't need a security detail at school." "Riley." Seo Jin. They looked at each other. A standoff, the kind they used to have in the early days, before the silence, before the distance. Back when they still cared enough to argue. "One guard," he said. "One, who stays in the car, who you won't even see." "Fine. Thank you. You're welcome." Her boarding call echoed through the terminal. She picked up her carry-on. Seo Jin. "Yes?" "The greenhouse, while I'm gone." "What about it?" "Water the African violets every 3 days. Not every day. Every 3 days. Too much water and the roots rot. And the orchids need indirect light, so don't move them from the east shelf." "I'll remember." "Write it down." "I'll write it down." She started to turn toward the gate. Then she stopped. "One more thing." "Yes?" "The earrings." She touched her ear. She was wearing them, the jade ones with the gold clasps. They caught the fluorescent airport light and glowed faintly green. "They're beautiful. Your mother was right. The jade was the better choice." Something happened to Seo Jin's face. Something that broke through the careful composure, the controlled exterior, the armor he wore every day like a second skin. It was fast, just a flash. But she caught it. Relief, gratitude, and something deeper than both. "Come back," he said. 2 words. Simple, no command in them. Just a request from a man who was learning, slowly and painfully, how to ask instead of order. "Water the violets," she said, and she walked through the gate. Kampala in October was everything Riley's memory had promised and more. The air was warm and sweet, thick with the scent of red earth after rain and cooking fires in the evening. The mango tree in her grandmother's yard was heavy with fruit, so heavy the branches drooped like arms full of gifts. Her grandmother, Nakawisi, was smaller than Riley remembered, 86 years old and barely 5 feet tall, with a face full of wrinkles that deepened when she smiled, which was often. She took one look at Riley in the doorway, grabbed both her hands, and said, "You're too thin. Sit down. I'm making groundnut stew." Tunu arrived the next day. She swept into the house with the energy of a woman who ran an entire hospital ward and still had time to lecture her younger sister about poor life decisions. "Let me see you," Tunu said, taking Riley's face in her hands and examining her like a patient. "Eyes clear, color good, skin healthy. I see no lasting effects of eating poison at a dinner party." "It wasn't a party. I don't care what it was. You called me at 2 in the morning saying I've been poisoned and expected me to just calmly walk you through treatment options like we were discussing a recipe. And you did. Perfectly. Because I am a professional. But inside, Benny, inside, I was falling apart." They sat in the kitchen, the three of them. Nakawisi at the stove, Tunu at the table, Riley between them. And for the first time in years, Riley felt the knots in her chest begin to loosen. She told them everything. Not the syndicate details. She knew better than to involve her family in that. But the emotional landscape, the loneliness, the invisibility, the slow erosion of self that happens when you love someone who has stopped seeing you. Nakawisi listened without interrupting. When Riley finished, the old woman set a bowl of stew in front of her and sat down across the table. "Your grandfather," Nakawisi said, "was a stubborn man. When we were first married, he went through a time, 2 years, maybe 3, where he was so focused on the farm, on providing, on being the man he thought he needed to be, that he forgot to be the man I needed him to be. What did you do?" "I planted a garden." Riley blinked. "A garden?" "Right in the middle of his best field, his cassava field. I woke up one morning, marched out there, and started planting flowers. Hibiscus, bougainvillea, everything bright and wild and completely useless to a farmer." Tunu laughed. "I've never heard this story." "He came running out of the house like the world was ending. 'Woman, what are you doing to my field?' And I said, 'I'm making something beautiful in the middle of something that has forgotten how to see beauty.' What did he say? He stood there for a long time. Just stood there. Then he went inside, came back with a watering can, and started watering the flowers." Nakawisi smiled. He never forgot again. Riley looked down at her stew. The steam rose in curls, carrying the scent of ground nuts and garlic and home. "My greenhouse," she said softly. "What?" "He built me a greenhouse. When we first married. Because I mentioned once that I missed the flowers from home." Nakawisi reached across the table and covered Riley's hand with hers. Her palm was rough and warm and steady. "A man who builds you a greenhouse," she said, "has not forgotten. He has just lost his way. The question is whether he is willing to find it again. I think he is. Then you go back, and you water the flowers together." The 2 weeks passed the way time always passes in the places we love. Too fast. Riley spent mornings with her grandmother, learning old recipes and listening to stories she'd heard 100 times, but never got tired of. She spent afternoons with Tunu at her clinic, helping with inventory and research, feeling the familiar thrill of science and medicine that she'd put aside when she moved to Korea. She spoke to Seo Jin every evening. Not long calls, 20 minutes, sometimes 30, but consistent, deliberate. He told her about the restructuring, about the peace agreement holding, about Taisik accidentally overwatering the orchids and having a minor crisis. I told you to write it down, she said. He says he did write it down, but then he lost the paper. Your brother runs half of your security operations and he can't keep track of a piece of paper. I'm not defending him. I'm just reporting the facts. She heard something in his voice that she hadn't heard in a long time. Lightness. The weight was still there. It would always be there. But it was shared now. Distributed. He wasn't carrying it alone anymore, and she could hear the difference. On the last night, she sat on the porch of her grandmother's house and looked at the stars. They were different here. Brighter, closer, arranged in patterns she'd known since childhood but had slowly forgotten in the light-polluted skies above Jeonju. Her phone buzzed. A message from Seo Jin. The violets are alive. All of them. I checked twice. She smiled. I'm proud of you. I'm proud of you too. For everything. Not just the violets. A pause. Then, your flight is at 9 a.m.? Yes, I'll be at the gate. He was. She saw him the moment she walked through the arrivals hall at Cheongju International, standing in the same spot, in the same dark coat, hands in his pockets. But something was different. His posture was more open. His shoulders were down. He wasn't scanning the room for threats the way he usually did. He was looking for her. Their eyes met across the terminal. She walked toward him. Not fast, not slow. Steady. When she reached him, he took her suitcase from her hand without being asked and set it on the ground beside them. Welcome home, he said. Is it? She asked. Home. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out his phone, turned it toward her. On the screen was a photograph, a selfie, taken clumsily, at an angle that suggested the photographer was not experienced with the format. It was Seo Jin, in the greenhouse, surrounded by flowers. The African violets were visible on the shelf behind him, alive, green, thriving. And in his other hand, he was holding a small watering can. I've been going every evening, he said. After my last meeting of the day, I sit on the bench where you sit, and I water the plants, and I think about what I want to say to you when you get back. He put the phone away. I have a whole list, but the only thing that matters is this. I see you. I've always seen you. I just forgot how to show it, and I'm going to spend the rest of my life making sure you never doubt it again. Riley looked at him, at this man, this complicated, stubborn, powerful, terrified, trying man, who had built her a greenhouse and then forgotten to visit it, who had let her become invisible, and then been shattered when she reminded him what she was capable of, who was standing in an airport holding a photograph of himself watering flowers because it was the only way he knew to say, I'm learning. The rest of your life is a long time, she said. I know. You might get tired. I won't. You might get busy. I'll get unbusy. Your mother might. My mother called you Riley last week. She, what? At dinner. She said, Riley prefers the jasmine tea, not the green. Without being prompted, Taesik and I both nearly choked. Riley stared at him. You're joking. I am not joking. She also asked when you were coming back, which is the closest Madame Quan has ever come to saying she misses someone. Something bloomed in Riley's chest, warm, tentative, fragile as a new shoot pushing through soil. Not trust, exactly. Not yet. But the possibility of trust. The conditions for it. Okay, she said. Okay? Take me home. I want to see my greenhouse. He picked up her suitcase. They walked through the terminal together, side by side, matching pace, neither one leading or following. Just two people, moving in the same direction, at the same speed, toward the same place. And for the first time in a very long time, Riley Nakamatte Kwon, pharmacologist, strategist, wife, gardener, survivor, felt seen. 6 months later, the greenhouse had expanded. What had once been a single glass structure on the east side of the Quan estate was now a connected pair. The original, with Riley's orchids and violets and jasmine, and a new addition that she'd designed herself. The new section housed a small laboratory bench, a reference library, and the equipment she needed to complete her pharmacology thesis. She defended her thesis on a Tuesday in March at the University in Daejeon, in front of a panel of 3 professors who had no idea that the composed young woman presenting groundbreaking research on toxin adsorption rates in activated carbon compounds had tested her own theories on herself, in a greenhouse, after eating poison at a family dinner. Seo Jin was in the audience. So was Tai-sik. So was Madame Kwon, who had traveled 2 hours by car and hadn't complained once, which was either a sign of personal growth or a sign that the world was ending. Tunu watched via video call from Kampala, crying openly while Nakawisi sat beside her eating ground nuts and saying, "Of course she passed. She is my granddaughter." After the defense, which she passed with distinction, Riley found Seo Jin waiting outside the lecture hall. "Dr. Kwon," he said, "don't start. Dr. Kwon, I will walk away. Dr. Kwon, Seo Jin." He stopped, smiled. A real smile. The kind that transformed his face from something intimidating into something human. "I'm proud of you," he said. She looked at him, at this man who had hurt her, who had ignored her, who had nearly lost her, and who had spent the last 6 months doing the unglamorous, uncomfortable, daily work of earning her back. Not with grand gestures, not with gifts or promises, but with presence, with attention, with the quiet, stubborn commitment to showing up, at the airport, at the greenhouse, at a university lecture hall on a Tuesday afternoon, when it mattered. "I know," she said. That evening they sat in the greenhouse together, side by side on the wooden bench. The sun was setting through the glass walls, painting everything gold and amber and deep, warm orange. The orchids swayed gently in the ventilated air. The African violets, all of them, every single one, were alive and thriving. Between them, on the bench, sat 2 cups of jasmine tea. "Your mother made this," Riley said, looking at her cup. "She's trying. She used the wrong amount of water. She's trying." Riley took a sip. It was, objectively, not great tea, but it was made by a woman who had spent 60-odd years building walls and was now, slowly and awkwardly, learning how to build bridges instead. And that counted for something. "Seo Jin." "Yes?" "That night, at the dinner, when I walked down the table and took your plate. Did you know in that moment what I was doing?" He was quiet for a long time. The sunset deepened. A bird called from somewhere in the garden. "No," he said. "In that moment, I thought you were trying to get my attention." "I was." He looked at her. I thought it was about the plate, about the food, about the fact that I'd been ignoring you. I thought you were making a statement." "I was making a statement, but not the one I thought." "No." She looked at the violets. "I was saying, I choose you. Even when you don't choose me. Even when you forget I'm here. Even when it costs me everything. I choose you." The greenhouse was quiet. The last of the sunlight slipped below the horizon, and the first stars appeared through the glass ceiling, faint, far, steadfast. Seo Jin set down his tea. He turned to face her fully. "I choose you too," he said. "Every day. From now on, it will always be you." Riley looked at him, at the man, at the greenhouse, at the life they were building, piece by piece, day by day, flower by flower, from the ruins of what had almost been lost. "Then water the violets," she said, and he picked up the watering can. I'm not going to lie. Writing Riley's character changed something in me. She's that person we all need in our corner. Hit subscribe, share this with someone who reminds you of her, and comment Greenhouse. I want to see how many real ones are watching.